As I mentioned earlier, this is the What's New in 2025 podcast series from JSC. This is episode 2 of 9, which we're going to deal with documentation of various types. Before we get into the complete What's New, I want to just call your attention to some changes that are sort of being made as we continue on developing SOLIDWORKS into this next century here. In 2024, about a year ago, we released the first SP0 or GA general availability of SOLIDWORKS 2024. And since then, in the 12 months in between then and now, we've actually kicked out about 200 enhancements and performance updates throughout this year. So in service packs or functional deliveries, as we now call them, throughout the year, we're actually delivering not just bug fixes, but really a lot more of what we're delivering in these FDs now are actual enhancements. We're not necessarily waiting for a whole year when we have some functional enhancements ready to go. We'll put those in with functional delivery. So that's over 200 that's happened this year. You'll even notice that some of the things I'm talking about in terms of enhancements for 2025 actually came a few months ago in a recent functional delivery. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into the specifics of today's topics, which include drawings and MBD, as well as document collaboration, and also one of my favorites, which is rendering. So when it comes to drawings and MBD, I don't have a huge laundry list to go through today. We're keeping these podcasts in the 20-minute range, but these are the highlights I want to point out in the drawing side, especially one of my brother John's favorite ones, which is reload for drawings. And then also a lot of people are looking at MBD. Some people have already deployed it. And of course, as a relatively young discipline, when you juxtapose it with 2D drawings, have been around forever, there's always some room for improvements and enhancements and some really nice ones in 2025 here. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these live here. So the first thing is, if you want to kind of revert your drawing back before you saved it, you can now reload it and just reload it like an assembly or part would be able to, whereas before you had to close the drawing without saving it and open it up again to do that. So that's welcome. It's a much straightforward, kind of safer thing to do. Also, you're going to notice some enhancements from last year as well as this year. I have a bill of material, and one of the parts is actually a weldment. I'm going to do a detailed cut list, which we have been able to do before. We saw that last year. But when you have a detailed cut list now, we also have the ability to override the quantity. Instead of being a quantity of 1, 2, or 3 pieces, what we can do when we have a detailed cut list is calculate the quantity using the BOM quantity function, which in a weldment can be defined with any custom property or cut list property you want. So if I look at the cut list here, this weldment, and I look at the different properties that I have defined here, you can see here that we have a number of that I can use, but the one I'm using in this case is the length. So quantity is going to be the total length of all these different pieces added up together as they're all the same item. So that kind of alleviates the need for a separate cut list table. It's still there, but pretty much you can get everything you need now with a BOM and then detailed cut list functionality. Also, we're constantly keeping up with the latest standards. So our surface finish symbol now allows us to be compliant with the latest ISO standard. And of course, using favorites allows us to recall and not have to retype in a bunch of these over and over again. Now, the last one I'm going to show here is related to exporting DXF and DWG. This is not so much on the SOLIDWORKS user side as it is on the DWG editor side. So if you're using DraftSight or AutoCAD or whatever, one welcome change we can do in SOLIDWORKS now when we export is you can export views as blocks. So what that does on the AutoCAD or DraftSight side is it makes the views a simple block, much easier to manipulate on the 2D side here. So it's just something that people have asked for us to be able to do on the export side, and now we can do that in SOLIDWORKS 2025. Looking at MBD, one fundamental change to the software itself is SOLIDWORKS MBD is now an add-in. So you can now importantly, share it over like an SNL, just like any other add-in, whereas before you couldn't do that. Also, when you're dealing with parts that have draft on it like this, when we want to dimension that, we just can do a regular size dimension, pick these two faces, just tell it we're going to do face 1, face 2. And then also we can pick a top face adjacent to them, and that's going to allow for intersection. So we're going to get this kind of, we call it a wedge dimension. So it's going to give us the distance between those two edges and then also the angle of the two faces in one shot. So much easier and quicker and more intuitive to do things like that. Another big request from MBD users is being able to use their model and sketch dimensions as the expert dimensions. So now you can do that. If you want to, there's a tool we can do. We can go ahead and grab dimensions from features or sketches or whatever, and we can actually bring those into the MBD world as dim expert dimensions. So if you have model dimensions you want to reuse in this way, easily accomplish that. And then lastly, when you publish a STEP AP242 file, some software, some viewers, they want to see split up if they're what they call periodic faces, i.e. Cones and cylinders and things like that. And also they want to be able to access more edge and face properties. So when we export now to that 242 format, we now can include those as options. So if you want to see that information there, you want to be able to grab, for example, the half of the cylindrical faces. In some softwares, they want to see those split. You can now do that. So those are some key enhancements to drawings in MBD in 2025. Let's go ahead now and take a look at some enhancements to our online collaboration, which when I'm talking about online collaboration here, what I'm talking about in this case is, yeah, there's a PDM in there. We'll talk about a wrinkle there, but I'm talking about either SOLIDWORKS Connected, i.e. 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS, or traditional SOLIDWORKS with cloud services, which of course, again, this is a reminder, over a year ago, we went ahead and made it so that cloud services is part of the subscription for every new seat of SOLIDWORKS, and it can be added to existing subscriptions for a few $100s a year per user. It's actually not very expensive at all. So there's a lot of functionality there, and of course, we're always enhancing and improving that based on our feedback on people who adopted this, and we've helped adopt it. So we take a look at some of the enhancements. One of them is a kind of a UI learning enhancement. You have this idea of a quick tour. So you can turn the quick tour on, and then you have different topics, and it's going to walk you through elements of the user interface. So it's going to tell you, hey, here's, I can say, the 3D Experience platform, exposing you to concepts like bookmarks and collaborative spaces, and the idea of unlocking and locking files, and saving them, that kind of stuff. So it kind of walks you through it and gives you this sort of like, you click through it, an experience here, and you can go and there's 3 different quick tours you can go through. It'll checkbox which ones you've gone through. So this helps people kind of get acclimated to the tools and concepts of the 3D Experience platform that's used with the connected tools in the background here. So also, we've also enabled the 3D Swim communities on the platform to be inside of SOLIDWORKS right in the task pane, which is really cool. And it's just not like a read only. You can actually grab screenshots, you can do shares, you can do comments, on conversations, all without ever leaving SOLIDWORKS. So this is, again, another way to leverage what is in the 3D when you have, again, either SOLIDWORKS 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS or cloud services, and then you can bring this, but we're bringing more of that functionality into the SOLIDWORKS users direct interface right inside here. Now, additionally, when you're collaborating with other people, sometimes someone saves new stuff and your stuff's outdated. Now we have a ribbon on top that'll tell you, hey, what you're looking at here is outdated. And right inside, you see the user interface here, we can see what's been updated, what we need to reload and refresh to get the latest information. So you make that information more upfront, more directly noticeable, I guess, to the user. So again, people have that simplified experience. And then also, if you're using 3D Experience and cloud services to do more formal approvals with multiple people approving as part of the process, we can now map those things from the web interface into the title block inside of your SOLIDWORKS drawing. So it's, again, visible directly and more readily to the SOLIDWORKS user. SOLIDWORKS PDM for the first time can now be enabled when you're using SOLIDWORKS Connected. So say you're using 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS because you like the licensing aspects of it, deployment aspects of it, but you're using as a data management tool SOLIDWORKS PDM Professional, for example. Before you just couldn't use them together. Now you can. So you have access to all those functionalities in PDM, and then you still have access to the share and markup tool that is part of 3D Experience outside of data management. So if you want to send somebody basically an e-drawing in the web sort of thing, where they get a link and an email and they go right to their browser and do that share and markup functionality still works inside of your SOLIDWORKS Connected, your 3D Experience SOLIDWORKS, even if you're using PDM as your data management tool. Now, if you're using the web interface for accessing your cloud data management, one nice thing we've added here in the UI is no matter what your dashboard looks like, we have a widget here that'll let you access 3D Drive, 3D Space, Part Supply, and the bookmark editor. So you don't have to directly put this in on your dashboard pages. Sometimes you're like, well, okay, I don't always want to be able to access my files, but it's nice to be able to do it. Instead of having to switch to another tab, you can just grab those file management or access items right from the UI, the top ribbon, without actually dedicating a space on your dashboard page if you don't want to. And then if you look at one other thing, your data in your 3D Experience web platform here, we now have right up front here access to the entire history of the file, what happened to it, every change, every approval, all the comments that were added, all that stuff is now just part of just the regular information panel. Again, you couldn't get this before. We had to go to another place to get it. What we're doing this in 2025 here is making these tools and this information more accessible to the SOLIDWORKS or casual user without them having to go to a bunch of different places to get it. So some really nice, again, I'm going to say this is a work in progress. This is very user driven. When you're seeing these changes in the UI and accessibility and even to the quick tours, that comes directly from the experiences that we're having with you as customers as we implement these new tools. And it's like, it'd be great if this, or I would really like it if that would happen. So SOLIDWORKS is receptive as ever to those suggestions, and they're doing a great job of implementing that stuff in an effective and timely manner. All right, let's talk about our final topic for this morning's podcast, which is rendering, one of my favorites. It's super fun to bring designs to life using SOLIDWORKS Visualize and Visualize Professional. And again, not a huge laundry list of like 20 things right here on our podcast highlight here, but I do have something I definitely want to point out. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is this magic API thing right here, where I'm just going to, in SOLIDWORKS, just send this thing for offline rendering as is right now. Now, how can you do that? Well, because now in 2025, people have access to the API for Visualize. So that means you can make a little macro in SOLIDWORKS like this to just drag and kick out a quick old rendering preset with the background moving and stuff, and kick these renderings out really quickly. Again, it's a macro. You can write your own. I'm going to guess there's going to be stuff out on the user portal and 3D Experience platform that you can probably get some examples of that. But yeah, it's basically the idea is that the API for Visualize is now exposed to anybody who wants to play with it to make their own applications. If you're a regular user of Visualize, not a programmer, for example, there's still a lot of good stuff in here. In Visualize 2025, we have a newly redesigned FAT that actually takes better advantage of modern graphics hardware that we have on machines, even laptops these days. Faster, makes setting things up even more quick. So you can go kind of full screen here and still have lots of fluidity and moving and placing things, so you don't have to kind of make a small little preview window when you have a complicated rendering that you want to set up. Also, sometimes people want to use Visualize Boost to kind of outsource rendering to other computers. Basically, in 2025, Boost is the same tool. It's just easier from a user interface standpoint to install and then to use on the client side. Now, thing that I do a lot of, I know a lot of people that use Visualize do, is they want to render with the transparency, so they kick the background out. You could have the ground shadow come along with that transparency, but it's something a little artificial. So now we have another option. If you want to do the ground shadow catcher on, but you don't actually want to see the shadow itself, just the lighting and bounce, you can turn on the faded option there, which basically separates that out, gives you the lighting effects from the ground bounce, but you don't have the ground elements there. So that, again, is really great if you're taking this and then compositing it in a Photoshop or even, plain old PowerPoint slide. Now, if you're into virtual reality and you want to kick out the GLTF file or GLB files, now when we export those things in those VR formats, okay, I guess they call them XR now. I still use VR because I'm old. But yeah, now it's a lot easier and it's a lot more visually fidelity, I guess you could call it. It looks nicer. And if you don't have a VR headset or whatever, again, little known fact, you can put these in a PowerPoint and just basically copy the slide, use the morph transition, and it'll go from one orientation to the next. So you're not interactively rotating these things. You're basically just taking a slide, putting the GLTF file in there. You can click on it when you're in the slide editor and rotate it however you want it to look, then duplicate the slide, and then in the second slide, rotate it somewhere else. And then when you transition using the morph transition in modern versions of PowerPoint, you'll rotate it with shadows and highlights and everything. It can be very, very, very impressive for design reviews and sales pitches. So we've gone a little longer than the 20 minutes, but we've now completed the discussion on our highlights of SOLIDWORKS 2025 enhancements in documentation, drawings, MBD, collaboration, and rendering. So this is episode 2 of 9. Next week, I'm going to be doing episode 3. So we'll be a third of the way done by the end of next week. And the topic there is next gen tools, which is not just like the X apps, although I am going to go through some new stuff in the X apps like Xshape and Xdesign and things like that. I'm also going to talk about next generation of 2D design with some really neat enhancements in DraftSight, for example. All right, so this has been episode 2 of 9. Next week we'll have episode 3, and I hope to see you all there. Until then, the gym is closed. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Tuesday.